Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Team Daddy Weekly Recap. I am your host, Shapiro the Hero, aka Daddy Dreidels. We are officially into the second half of our fantasy football season, and we have a clear pack of teams who will be in the playoffs, teams who will definitely not be in the playoffs, and teams who might be able to make a late push if they play their cards right. As always, we'll go around the league looking at scores and stats, we'll check out standings with the current playoff seedings as of this week, and we'll preview Week 9 of the Team Daddy League. But before we do anything else, I do want to give a big shout out to George for filling in for me this past week on recap duties. Seriously, George, thank you. Great job. Very much appreciated. I was studying all week for a licensing exam, which I passed, thankfully, and then moving into the new apartment, all while dealing with a sick baby. It was just a lot. So, George, thank you for stepping up. Really appreciate it. However, everything is great. Everything is awesome. And so I am thrilled to be able to resume my weekly duties as your recap host. And now, this word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Infant Tylenol. Whether you're treating a baby with a fever, or you babies just get headaches from all the losing you're doing, take Infant Tylenol. Works great, long-lasting, Infant Tylenol. As always, we'll start things off with our matchup of the week. You guys really need to start winning some games here because I'm tired of being in these things. I mean, seriously, this was my third matchup of the week in the last 4 weeks. And as usual, I won again, this time beating Swans 183.25 to 129.95. Tyreek Hill, oh captain my captain, not only led my team in scoring with 54.75 points, but also won me $10 as the league's highest scoring player in Week 8. The funny thing is I wasn't even planning on using Hill as my captain until Swans texted me and asked me about it, so thank you Swans for that free $10. Appreciate it, buddy. I also got 41.6 points from Christian McCaffrey, who became the first player since 2005 to throw, catch, and run for a touchdown all in the same game. Swans' captain Mike Evans also had a big game with 34.95 points, but unfortunately the injuries to Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Higbee came back to hurt Swans and cost him the matchup. He will hope to regroup next week against Josh, who still needs to change his team name, by the way, while I will face Armenti in Week 9. Speaking of Armenti, he took a tough L this week against George, losing 192.05 to 148.8. I say tough because George's team led the league in scoring this week, despite Armenti outscoring 4 other teams. For George, Captain Dalvin Cook led the way with 45.15 points, and he also got a monster game from Deontay Foreman with 36.8 points. For Armenti, he was led by Derrick Henry in his 45.8 points, but the big story was Cooper Kupp. Despite racking up 22.9 points, Kupp left his game early with an ankle injury. With Breece Hall already on the IR and Debo hurt, could Armenti's season be ending right as the second half begins? He'll face me next week to find out, while George will take on Kyle in Week 9. And speaking of Kyle, our defending champ is looking like a lock for the toilet bowl this year after losing to Josh 188.75 to 85.95. In our biggest blowout of the week, Kyle is proof that when you sell your team, things can get real ugly real fast. After trading away Tyreek Hill, Kenneth Walker, and Ramondre Stevenson, Kyle's leading scorer this week was Rondale Moore with 23.4 points. On the other sideline, Josh got 38.9 points from DeAndre Hopkins and 20-point games from Stephon Diggs, Tyler Conklin, and the aforementioned Stevenson. Josh has now won 2 weeks in a row and will look to make it 3 next week against Big Swans, while Kyle is now 3-5 and will take on George in Week 9. Our second highest scoring team this week was Big John, who actually made a big announcement last week that he will be joining the Daddy ranks before next season. Another big congratulations to John and Maciel. Big John now has won 3 in a row after defeating Cheese 191 to 123.48. Big John was led by a trio of 30-point scorers in Travis Etienne, Jalen Waddle, and DJ Moore. Even with Tua sitting on the bench with 42 points, Big John improves to 4-4 and is firmly in playoff conversation after a disappointing season last year. As for Cheese, he will most likely be joining Kyle in the toilet bowl as he is now 1-7. Matthew Stafford led the way for Cheese with 31.88 points, and Cheese also got 21 points from Jacoby Myers. However, with this loss, Cheese has now dropped 5 in a row and is trying to get every third-round pick available. He will face Jed in Week 9, while Big John will try to get above 500 against Brett. And speaking of Lord Brothermore, who takes the cake for the stupidest team name, by the way, Josh, you win most defensive. I didn't forget about you. Brett has somehow taken sole possession of second place after beating PJ 176.45 to 135.4. Just like Big John, Brett had a trio of 30-point scorers this week, as Dak Prescott, Nick Chubb, and Captain Brandon Ayuk all had monster games. Brett also got 27.1 points from Amari Cooper, and has proven that draft night does not decide how well your team will do during the season. PJ can also attest to that fact, as he has now lost 3 straight and will end up squandering his so-called stacked draft night. Despite a combined 68.2 points from A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin, PJ is now 2-6 and is in full sell mode. He will take on Zach in Week 9, while 6-2 Brett will face Big John. Our final matchup of the week was also our closest, as victory and defeat were separated by just over a point. But it was Jed triumphing over Zach, 161.75 to 160.45. Captain Dallas Goddard was the difference for Jed, who also got 42.7 points from Tony Pollard. For Zach, he got a combined 82 points from Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurts, but the rest of his team outside of the Eagles' D failed to even show up this week. Zach and Jed are both now 3-5 and will try to sneak into the final playoff spot. Zach will start off his second half against PJ, while Jed will square off against Cheese. Let's take a look at the league standings as we hit the halfway marker. Surprisingly, I am still in first, but perhaps even more surprising is the fact that Brett is in second. Josh sits in third place, George is in fourth, and Swans is in fifth, all at 5-3. Big John and Armenti round out our teams currently in the playoffs at 4-4, but just behind them at 3-5 are Jed, Zach, and Kyle, all only one game back of a playoff spot. PJ is in 11th at 2-6, and Cheese sits firmly in last at 1-7. As we kick off the second half of the regular season this week, I can already tell it's going to be a wild ride to the finish line. There has been some wild trading going on, not just within Team Daddy, but within the NFL as well. In the standings, 3rd through 10th place is separated by just 2 games, so don't throw in the towel just yet. Keep setting your lineups, check in that waiver wire, and put your best team out there every week. Weekly winners are still up for grabs, even if you're out of playoff contention, and who doesn't like winning some money? I know, coming from the Jew, that joke writes itself, but let's face it, you have a better shot at winning $10 here than the $1 billion Powerball jackpot. Thank you as always for watching. This has been your Team Daddy Weekly Recap. I am Daddy Dreidels, and I will see you next time. L'chaim, motherfuckers!